All right, we're back. It's the end of week one, and we're heading into week two of the CFL 2024 regular season. I'm Jon. This is Jess.
Hey, Johnny D, how are you doing?
So we had a pretty exciting week last week in the CFL.
Talking about last week, that Winnipeg game was quite surprising. The Montreal Alouettes proved themselves, in my opinion, to be not a fluke. I kind of thought they fluked out last year by winning the Grey Cup, by beating Toronto, who was 16-2. I thought they fluked out against Winnipeg last year, and then they decisively beat them 27-12 at home in Winnipeg. Winnipeg looked slow. Montreal looked really good. And that just reminds me of your pick about the Tabby Cats coming out of the East. Man, I still think they're going to be third. Toronto's still really good, and so is Montreal.
I agree. Toronto did look really good. The game that I thought was the most exciting was the last game of the week, the BC Toronto game. Yeah, I was pretty certain you were going to be coming out of that game with a 3-1 record. And it was heartbreaking to see that punt just stop right on the 1 or 2 yard line. And then everything just fell apart. And I was like, oh.
At the end of the day, a very entertaining football game. And all four games were really awesome. And the Edmonton game that we spoke about briefly off air, they had 14 Grey Cup champions return back to Edmonton. They actually moved the game, the time-wise, because it was going to conflict with the Oilers game. And it was really a shame because they had these 14 awesome athletes from the Edmonton football team, as we're going to call it. Everyone from like Warren Moon showed up. Damon Allen was there. So was Ricky Ray. Gizmo Williams. And he was like laughing with a big smile. And so they got all these guys to come into Edmonton for this special ceremony. It's just kind of unfortunate that the Oilers happen to be playing at the exact same time.
So we're coming into week two. We got a team that we haven't seen yet in the regular season, Ottawa. Yeah. And they're going to be facing up against Winnipeg at home.
One cool thing about Ottawa having a bye in the first week is that, they're still undefeated right now. But Winnipeg choked huge against Montreal last week. They're 7-point favorites against Ottawa. Ottawa was crappy last year. Zach Collaros, who's the quarterback for the Bombers and so forth, was really upset about how they performed in week one. And so therefore, even though Winnipeg's down by a touchdown to start the game off, I'm taking the Bombers.
I'm hesitant to go against you this week because you're coming into week two with a good record, 2-2. We talked a lot last week about like coin toss, every game seemed 50-50, and you finished 50-50. But I have to agree, even though I haven't seen Ottawa play, I think Winnipeg, they showed some real strength against Montreal, and we'll find out what Ottawa has, if they're crappy like you say, or if they're going to surprise and perhaps keep it close. So my official wager on this game will also be Winnipeg.
Winnipeg with the 7 points, 3 points. All right. Montreal at Edmonton, and only 5.5-point favorites. And man, if I was to put the most money on any game this week, it would be that for Montreal to beat Edmonton by only 5.5 points. They went in and smoked the Bombers last week. They won the Grey Cup last year.
That one is surprising. I wonder if it's like a bit of a bounce back game, and that's what they're expecting, that maybe Edmonton had a poor showing in week one. They're going to come back strong at home week two.
Yeah, I was uncertain about Montreal going into the last week's game, but they took it to the Bombers really well last week. I don't see why they wouldn't do the same to Edmonton.
Well, for me this week, you're right, Montreal's going to win. But for some reason, I just don't think they're going to win by a lot. Maybe it is a bounce back game. Maybe they win by 4 or 5. Sure, they come away with a win, but I don't think they're going to cover. And so I'm going to go with Edmonton and take the 5.5.
Yeah, I'm taking the Alouettes easily to beat Edmonton by 5.5 points.
Back to BC and Calgary, yeah. 50 Cent in the house.
50 Cent's going to be rocking it. I'm not sure if you've been to BC Place when it's been sold out. I've only been there a handful of times for the odd Grey Cup or Western Final. But when you get that place with 55,000 people in there, BC's probably going to feed off that, but also like the Stampeders are going to also feed off that because they're coming from Calgary, and a visiting team would love nothing more than just shove it in the face of 55,000 people that are cheering against them. So I think it's going to be one hell of a football game.
I think back to last week, and Hamilton did pretty well against Calgary. They were running the ball. I don't think they ran the ball enough. And BC looked to have a really strong run game, and their passing game was awesome. But their offensive line, BC's offensive line was terrible. 6 sacks on Vernon Adams by the end of the game. I mean, for that reason alone, if you're going to give Calgary 8.5 points, and probably the same people are going to show up and try to stop and protect Vernon Adams, maybe BC wins, but I don't think they're going to win by more than 8.5. So I'm putting my money on Calgary.
I kind of think I am too. I hate to do it. It's tough in CFL in week 2. BC could easily win that game 55-10. Like, you don't know.
Did you officially make a pick on that game, Jess? Calgary and BC?
Yeah, I took Calgary with the points. The good thing about betting against your own team is that, hey, if the Lions lose, then I still win. And if the Lions win, then I still win. Just not the bet. And I'm going to be betting very small on that one. Then we got Sask and Hamilton on the Sunday. The Riders are only favored by 1 point. Bo Levi Mitchell for Hamilton looked pretty good in Calgary. Give the Riders 1 free point, 1 free rouge. Take them to beat up your tabbies that you picked for the Grey Cup, and I'll want to roast you about that in a little bit. But what do you think about that game on Sunday?
Yeah, I picked them to get to the Grey Cup. I didn't pick them to win the Grey Cup. I thought watching that game last week with Hamilton that Bo Levi Mitchell actually played pretty poorly. You know, a lot of his passes were off the mark. The first quarter and a half, everything was going high over the receiver. His receivers couldn't seem to catch and hold on to the ball either. So I think this week they'll probably have a bounce back game. Bo Levi's probably going to settle in. Their run game looked great. And I think they'll easily beat Saskatchewan. So even with a point, I'm putting my money on Hamilton.
On Hamilton, even with a free point. You love your Tabby Cats.
It's not that I love my Tabby Cats. I just think that what I saw last week, they kind of beat themselves. If they had caught a few more balls, if BLM had put his passes on his receivers, I think they had a pretty well-rounded team. We'll see.
I think you're right. And that's kind of one of the so-called problems with the CFL is that they only have 2 exhibition games. And I guarantee you, Bo Levi Mitchell probably played maybe 1/2 of those 2 exhibition games. The CFL's like never really kicked up to be high octane with great passes like you're talking about, usually until like week 2 or 3 or 4 into the season. In week 1, they're still testing each other out. If he stays healthy, he's going to be good. And maybe your Tabbies have a half chance of making the Grey Cup, but I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe.
It's going to be Toronto or Montreal coming out of the East.
You've been giving me the gears about my CFL picks. BC out of the West, Hamilton out of the East. What are yours, Jess?
At the moment right now, for Grey Cup, I'm predicting BC versus Montreal. Toronto looked good. That quarterback looked good. What was his name? Dunleavy or something like Duke. Yeah.
Yeah. Duke looked great.
Chad Kelly might not get his job back if Duke keeps going like that.
A rising tide lifts all boats. So maybe that whole team is the rising tide, and Chad Kelly just happened to be the tallest boat.
And they are the boat men. So
they are the boat men. All right. Well, that's week 2 for Placed on the 55 podcast with Jon and Jess. And tune in next week for the outcomes, our week 3 predictions. And just remember that this is the only podcast that goes a full 110 yards.